And we're going to follow the Atlanta tradition, and we'll just do a little chant before we start. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karava Vahai Tejasvinavadi Tamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May the divine being
as a mother and father.
May the divine being
Support and nourish us as a mother and father.
May we have the strength and skill
To study together the art of spirituality.
May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us all. All right, so we are, I believe, on chapter 34, I think it is. Let's see here. Oh, 38, my goodness. Spiritual practice will be asserted and reasserted. That sort of points at repetition. So, good morning.
Morning.
Okay, so our questioner, well, last week we were talking about trust. Our questioner is quite frustrated because, the teacher is constantly talking about his experience and pointing at this world that somehow the questioner can't experience and can't understand, can't see. And, oops, just a moment. And so he's frustrated as to why it is. Why can't you, show this to me? What's my problem? Good morning, Prafula.
Hello, sir. Just to see you and say good morning to you. Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have to catch up the book with the book.
Very good, Prafula. I'm in Atlanta, so I have a live group of people here in front of me too, so I can't fully indulge.
Very nice.
But okay. I send you my love for sure.
Yeah. Did I disturb you? I think I disturbed you.
It's no problems. You are worthy of a disturbance, no worries.
Yeah.
So I'm going to.
So this is the class for the I am that, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
okay. I was sitting with the book only.
All right. Okay, I'm going to mute everybody here so we can get the thing. And here comes Jen. All right. So he's talking about this frustration, and it reminds me, actually, Frank, this is kind of for you. I thought of it last night after you left. That and I also, you showed me that verse from Inspired Talks the other day. Can you show me that again after the class? And I want to take a picture of it because that was a very important piece of information for me. Where the questioner at one point is very frustrated with Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj, and he's telling him, why you're sitting there a realized soul, and I'm sitting here an ignorant, fool, and I can't understand anything that, can't you help me? Please help me see these things. And Nisargadatta said something, I read this about 20 years ago now, and when I read it then, I almost fell out of the chair in the front living room where I was sitting. He said, I am helping you. He said, I have appeared in your dream, and I am telling you, you are dreaming. Mm-hmm. Listen to this.
The thing you just read, could you read it once more, please?
What I just said?
The dream.
Yeah, he said, I am helping you. I have appeared in your dream, and I am telling you, you are sleeping. Right? And I just love that idea. It really follows that idea that this world that we're in right now is dream, that it is dreamlike. We say dreamlike. I don't know whether they're the same or not yet, but at some point perhaps. But this notion that our teachers appear in our dream, and their message to us is that you're dreaming. This world is not real. We can sort of see that. And then here's another little piece that was given to me the other day, and he just pointed it out. Oh, here we go. This is from Inspired Talks. These are the words of Swamiji. He says, whenever you learn or gain anything from a man's words, know that you had the experience in a previous existence, because experience is the only teacher. Right? So when we hear these truths from swamis, or we read these truths in a book, he says, know for sure that you've had that experience in a previous existence, because it can only come out of experience. This knowledge, this learning experience is the only teacher, according to Swamiji. And so I thought, once again, there's this link to our own inner world, that we create the universe that we live in. And even the people in it are created by the self, which thou art that, right? It's not your ego self that creates this, just like it's not your ego self that creates the dream that you experience at night, but it comes from the self, and that we're inhabiting, really, and I like to think that we're inhabiting a scripture, that this moment is scripture, because as we've shared in the past, here we go repeating again, that that this moment is divine, that this moment is the beloved, it is the I am. That's the whole point of the name I am, the isness, the being. And so we're inhabiting scripture. And if you purify the mind, which means you remove the ideas of me and mine from it, you can hear the scripture, you can read the scripture. Life will teach you and bring you to the feet of the beloved, or bring you to your realization. So our questioner again here is now talking to Nisargadatta, and once again he's frustrated, and he's saying, look, it's not for training that I'm asking just now, but for its results. Oh, poor guy, first sentence, he's doomed. You had both. You are willing to tell us all about the training, but when it comes to results, you refuse to share. Either you tell us that your state is beyond words, or that there is no difference, that where we see a difference, you see none. In both cases, we're left without any insight into your state. Right? It's because we're dealing with something here that we can't fit in our mind. We've talked about that again, another repetition there. You cannot know the self in the mind, because the mind, what? Anybody want to repeat it for me to save me the embarrassment? Right? Why? Because the mind requires time-space causation in order to function. It needs subject, object, verb, past, present, future. Otherwise, it can't think of something. And what we're trying to come to know, not experience, because you can't experience one without a second, because you're both simultaneous here. You're the experiencer and the experience simultaneously. And how can you share that with somebody? We are always the experiencer in our reality, in our ego reality. We're never the experience itself, seemingly, right? Because we place a boundary in the middle of it. Our ego just runs a railroad right through the middle of that line, and we can't experience that oneness. And so the questioner is frustrated, because he's like, give me some insight. Tell me something about the results. Tell me, what is it like to be realized? What is it like to know the reality? And of course, Ramakrishna was the same way. See, the way he said it, I love the way Ramakrishna said it. He said, I really want to tell you. I was so excited. When I came into this plane, I wanted to share it. And he says, and Mother just stood on my tongue. My tongue couldn't move, because it can't become a word. It can't fit into the structure of mind. It can't fit into our delusion. It is the observer of our delusion. It cannot be a part of our delusion. And so Maharaj says, how can you have insight into my state when you are without insight into your own? Right? This is all of ours. This insight you can only have by knowing yourself. You can't know another person's mind without knowing your own mind. And that's part of our trouble. That's why we go to war, and why we have fights, and why we like some people and not other people, because we take the condition of our mind and we project it on others, right? We know why I smile. When I smile, that's because I'm being happy. And so when I see you smile, I project my feelings of what it is to smile onto you. It's that clunky word, that clunky language teaching that we've talked about. Right now, when I'm talking to you, there's all kinds of imagery in my head, parts of experience, things that different teachers and different swamis have said to me, memories of other times that I've shared these things. And what am I forced to do? I'm forced to shove all of that into my mouth and produce a silly sound, you know, bleh. And you get that silly sound, and all you get is that sound. And what do you have to do? You have to project all of your own stuff onto that silly sound to give it meaning. And we just sit here kind of crossing our fingers that we can communicate, that we're expressing this. And so that's why, you know, lectures is not where this is going to happen. We read this last night in the Katha Upanishad with Nachiketas. You know, Vedas and lectures and scriptures cannot teach you this. Experience can't really teach you this. All it can do is point, you know, point, and it's pointing at something within you. And what's it pointing at within you? It's pointing at the listener, pointing to that which is asking the questions, that which is looking at the teacher, that which is hearing me right now. But instead of having your focus on that which is hearing the teaching right now, you're focusing on the teaching, because the teaching is what's changing. It's what is interesting to the ego self, to the mind, that constant flickering change. And so it's very helpful even now, while you're listening to me, presumed me, don't put all of your attention on this end of the stick, you know, on the words I'm saying. Hear the words, but withdraw your interest in the particular of the words, and put your awareness on the awareness end of the stick. Pay attention and realize who is listening to Swami C right now, you know, and don't look around the room to answer the question. Look within yourself. Who is listening? Who wants to know what I'm trying to know right now? Because that is the self in plain sight and yet hidden simultaneously, right? And so this is what Nisargadatta is saying. He says, how can you have any insight into my state when you're without any insight into your own? When the very instrument of insight is lacking, is it not important to find it first? It is like a blind man wanting to learn painting before he regains his eyesight. You want to know my state, but do you know the state of your wife or your servant? Questioner, well, I'm asking for some hints only. He gets humble. Well, I gave you a significant clue. Where you see differences, I don't. All right, so remove the differences. Where do you see difference? You're looking at me, right? You say, oh, you are you and you're over there. But there are no boundaries in reality. And this is your dream. So you have created me. You know, in one sense, I'm in your world because you've invited me into your world. You're hearing these things because it's time for you to hear these things. But it's you, you know, it's the self. And when I say you, we of course immediately think of our body mind. But the you that we're talking about when we talk about inviting teachers into the dream is the universal self, which is thou art that, right? And the problem with thou art that it is that we hear that as thou art this. You know, we immediately attach our ego identity onto this thing called that, and try and get an understanding of it. But really all he's saying by thou art that is that you are not this. You are not this particular perspective of an ego self. He says, where you see difference, I don't. To me, it is enough. He says, that's the only teaching you need. In another place, he explains that. As the questioner asks him, he says, what's the difference between you and me? How come you somehow know this stuff inside and I don't? What's different between us? And Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj says something infuriating, you know, something that I can imagine just would put you through the roof. He said, the only difference between you and I is when my teacher told me that I am that, I believed him. You thought you had something to do, you know, and that's the only difference. He makes another wonderful statement kind of along the same lines at one point. He says, you know, the difference between a saint and a deluded soul. He said, when the deluded soul plays chess with the divine, he makes a first move. He said the saint, when he plays chess with the divine, lays his king down. Right? He knows, there's no first move there. And so that's the difference. Let go of the very first idea in your mind, which is the assumption that you don't know what I'm talking about, or what the scripture is saying, what the mother is betraying, or what the universe is playing in the moment, however you want to, however you're comfortable looking at that. Stop the assumption that you don't know and accept your realization, because the sages tell us that it's already there, it's already made, it's already complete. It's not an accomplishment because nothing has to be built. It's not an attainment because nothing has to be gained. And so when you sit for meditation, how many times Ramakrishna tells you, you are not the doer, right? And when you sit down to meditate, it's a verb. You think it's something that you're doing. It's not something that you're doing. It's something that you're surrendering to, something that you're falling into. And so your meditation is an act of surrender, an act of acceptance, an act of opening, letting go of all the reasons that you're having a bad meditation, letting go of all the reasons that you don't know God, all the reasons that you can't trust the love of the divine or the love of the nature of the universe. All those things that you assume you don't know, you do. Nothing in that sense is going to change on the day of your realization. It's simply going to be dropping the boundary, dropping the ego self that says I'm small and everything else is big and outside of myself. And so he's saying, stop it. He says, where you see differences, I don't. To me, that's enough. If you think it is not enough, I can only repeat, it is enough. Right? And so then you're going to hate the teacher. Shut up with this, it's enough thing. It's not enough. Well, are you going to learn by listening to your teacher and trusting those words, or are you going to trust yourself that says it's not enough? This is one of those conversations, that you have with folks. They come to you and they ask a question, you give them the answer, and they argue with you. You're like, well, why did you come to me if you knew already? Why are you asking me if you already have ideas about what's true? That's the trick of ego, right? That's the trick of egoism. By identifying with our limited and restricted sense of self, we look at the world with a limited and restricted point of view, and we'll argue about it. No, So he says to me, it's enough. If you think it's not enough, I'm only going to repeat it is enough. Think it out deeply, and you will come to see what I see. You seem to want instant insight, forgetting that the instant is always preceded by long preparation. The fruit falls suddenly, but the ripening takes time. After all, when I talk of trusting me, it is only for a short time, just enough time for you to start moving. The more earnest you are, the less belief you need. For soon you will find your faith in me justified. You want me to prove to you that I am trustworthy. How can I? And why should I? After all, what I am offering you is the operational approach, so current in Western science. When a scientist describes an experiment and its results, usually you accept his statements on trust and repeat this experiment as he describes it. Once you get the same or similar results, you need not trust him anymore. You trust your own experience. Encouraged, you proceed and move in and arrive in the end at substantially identical results. And that's the interesting thing, is that Vedanta, or our spiritual practice, is very scientific. The only problem is that the result is utterly subjective. Only the one knows, right? And so we all want to know without being the one who knows, right? We want to use our own mind. We want to use our own personality. We want to use our own whatever, our own little corral to see and know the entirety. But in fact, there is a you in there that already knows. right? So we spoke last night about the fact, maybe it wasn't a group, but I've said it before. We make stories up, right? We mentioned this yesterday. I know we make stories up, and by making up those stories, they become part of our ego. We're forced to live them, right? And my example always, it's mostly to this group right here, is that when we sit there and have a Q&A, and someone always says, "Oh, I can't meditate. It's so difficult." I cringe when I hear that, because what that person has done is created the story that they have to live. And how do they live that? Means every time they sit down to meditate, their first thought is, this is difficult. So they're doomed. It's going to be difficult, right? That's why Vivekananda says, say always, I am free, I am bliss. I've never been born, I've never been died. Never been died. This whole laying out your story and then living it, that's the problem. Thou art that. So sit down believing it, right? And if anything, any noise comes up, literally noise comes up that you interpret differently, stop it. Keep going forward with the idea, I am that. I'm ever free. I am pure. I'm blissful. I'm already realized, right? And all the arguments that come, withdraw. Don't counter them. don't think about them. Don't come up with a calculation in your mind. Shut it up, because it has nothing to do with you. You're not the one thinking, and it's not the inner guru talking to you. The inner guru doesn't talk in words, at least so far. The inner guru talks in knowings, right? Talks in knowings. When you run into the inner guru inside, you'll learn something, but the sensation is that you've always known it, and it was just uncovered. It never feels like it came outside. It never came out from outside. That's why Vivekananda says learning is not a matter of putting information into the mind. He said learning is uncovering, removing the ignorance, so that innate knowledge can be shown. And so approach your meditation in that sense, that your knowing is from inside. It's not what the mind is saying. You've identified with the mind, so you think when the mind makes noise and tells you to be quiet, that's you guiding yourself. You sit there in meditation, you're like, oh, stop thinking about that, stop thinking about that. And you think you're the one saying to yourself, stop thinking about that, because you've identified so deeply with your mind that you think your thoughts are you. They are not. They have nothing to do with you. Your thoughts might as well be the thoughts of the person next to you, because they're having the same thoughts. They're sharing the same thing. So simply keep stepping back, and don't hold the idea of being the discerner while you're doing that. Simply do it. Just keep withdrawing. Don't think that you're being taught, or that you're doing the right thing, or that you're even doing. Simply hold on to this truth you started with. I'm already realized. And anything counter to that, ignore it, and keep stepping backward. And eventually you'll fall off. You'll fall off the edge into an ocean of bliss. Or I like to think of it, you'll back into mother's lap. You can't objectify the truth. You can't put it in front of your senses. You can't put it in front of your awareness, because it is the awareness. So every time we want to learn something, we always have this horrible idea that we put it in front of us and study it, put our thoughts in front of us and think them as if we're going to get something from that. It's not that. That's noise. That's distraction. That's duality. If you've got a thinker and a listener in your mind, that's your duality, not this out here. That is causing this, right? The duality is of mind. What do you think you're going to think that you don't already know, right? Unless it's a renunciation, unless it's a denial, or I would have just stuck with my statement, except that he just told us to think it out deeply. So I can't really say stop thinking, although that's the practice that I think gave me the most insight, was just stop thinking and just start being fully here. with the idea that the moment can't contain thought, because the moment is a point and a thought requires a line, a past, a present, and a future so that it can say something. But the reality is the moment just being. And in being, there's no thought. There's simply awareness. There's simply, and not awareness of just a point in particular, but an opening of that awareness to everything. Feel everything all at once. Right? The questioner goes on for quite some time here. He says, and it's off to a bad start here. The Indian mind was made ready for metaphysical experiments by culture and nurture. To the Indian, words like direct perception of the supreme reality make sense and bring out responses from the very depths of his being. They mean little to a Westerner. Even when brought up in his own variety of Christianity, he does not think beyond conformity with God's commandments and Christ's injunctions. First-hand knowledge of reality is not only beyond ambition, but also beyond conceiving. Some Indians tell me, hopeless, the Westerner will not, for he cannot. Tell him nothing about self-realization. Let him live a useful life and earn a rebirth in India. I've been told that. I went to not Bhubaneswar. What's that? Puri. Where's the big Jagannath temple at? Is that Puri? Anyway, I went to a temple and they wouldn't let me in. I was with two other swamis. I was in Garawa even. And they wouldn't let me into the temple. And so the swamis told me I had to wait by the car. So I was standing there by the car waiting for them to come out. And there was a group of Indian men standing around me and they were talking to me. And one of them said to me, oh, he says, you know, perhaps in your next birth, you'll be able to go into the temple. And I, you know, being very cheeky by nature, I told him, I said, oh no, that was my last birth. I've already been inside. Which didn't make him very happy. So this idea, you know, already he's kind of limiting himself by identity, right? He's identifying with Americans. Well, what does he know of the Indian mind?
Is he Maurice Freeman?
Who's asking the questions?
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Yeah, I think he was a European Jew.
Uh-huh.
So I don't know why he's quoting Christians, but anyway.
Yeah, well, see, exactly. But this is the thing. I was having a conversation with someone the other day, and they kept talking about, you know, well, why do people and these persons and those people? I was like, enough with people. What do you know? You know nothing of another person. You have no access to their mind. You have no access to their history. You're projecting. Everything that you say about another person, you're giving me insight into you, you know, to see what's going on in there. And but you are stepping away from the very source of your problem and dealing with something that you have completely made up, that there is no way you can know or find a truth in it. And not only that, but you'll use the words of others to support your arguments about your inner self. What is that? You're the one that knows your inner self. You're the only one that knows your inner self. Stop using all of this to hide your delusion, to store your delusion. Put your delusions into the words of other people, the experiences of other people, the doings of other people. Right? I had a minister when I was in high school, Neil Gallagher, great man, actually. And one of his statements that I really liked at that time as a Christian, you know, he said, if someone's standing between you and God, that puts them that much closer to God than you. Right? So stop placing people between you and your realization, you and your knowledge. The arguments and ideas and thoughts and behaviors of others are not the reason for you to make decisions for yourself in that. So he says, he goes on, he says, the Wester will not, for he cannot. Tell him nothing about self-realization. Let him live a useful life and earn a rebirth in India. Then only will he have a chance. Some say reality is for all equally, but not all are equally endowed with the capacity to grasp it. The capacity will come with desire, which will grow into devotion and ultimately into total self-dedication. With integrity and earnestness and iron determination to overcome all obstacles. I love this. This is a question, believe it or not, right? Think about it. He's just sitting here telling him everything he knows and telling him like it is. in the form of a question, right? So he says, reality is for all equally, but not all are equally endowed with the capacity to grasp it. The capacity will come with desire, which will grow into devotion, and ultimately into total self-dedication with integrity and earnestness and iron determination to overcome all obstacles. The Westerner has the same chance as the Oriental man. All he needs is a rousing of interest. To rouse his interest in self-knowledge, he needs to be convinced about its advantages, right? He's partially true in that sense. We're raised in a mercantile, well, everybody's raised in a mercantile culture. He's not even right in that. But here he's saying we have to be convinced, of the value of the exchange rate of spiritual life. Am I going to get something that's worth my investment in this? First of all, you're trying to buy what you already own. So you're thinking about it all wrong, right? Somebody asked a question about the desire for liberation. Isn't that not a desire? Well, yes, it's a desire, but it's a desire for something you already have. So it's not going to put you on a journey. Right? It's going to be a self-realized thing. So Maharaj says, you believe it is possible to transmit a personal experience? Questioner, I don't know. You speak of unity, identity of the seer with the seen, when all is one. Communication should be feasible, Maharaj. To have the direct experience of a country, one must go and live there. Don't ask for the impossible. A man's spiritual victory, no doubt, benefits mankind, but to benefit another individual, a close personal relation is required. Such relation is not accidental, and not everybody can claim it. On the other hand, the scientific approach is for all. Trust, test, taste. What more do you need? Why push the truth down unwilling throats? It cannot be done, anyhow. Without a receiver, what can a giver do? And this is the thing, we've got our stories. We've got our reasons that we can't touch these things, right? We're told of an infinite grace, but we hold on to our guilt, our mind. That's why Holy Mother makes that one statement: the grace of God is easily obtained, but the grace of one's own mind is difficult indeed. You won't let yourself realize, for whatever reason that might be. For me, it was just the terror of not knowing, stepping into something I wasn't familiar with. The idea that oh my God, well, what if I just suddenly sit here and drool and I can't get up and feed myself anymore? What's going to happen then? It's all these what ifs, but it's a clinging, it's a white knuckling. I'm going to share a weird experience that I don't present as an experience of a big spiritual nature, because that's not what my learning was from it. And it happened before they even let me live in the monastery. I was living in the guest room in the old temple. So I was sitting there and I woke up in the middle of the night and I was sitting there thinking about my soul and just kind of pondering it. And I imagined, I'm going to talk about it like that. I imagined that my soul slipped, almost like you start to take a sword out of its sheath. I felt like I felt that slip inside. And I was like, whoa, what was that? Right? That's interesting. And so I thought, but I stopped it because as soon as I paid attention to it and recognized it, it stopped. And I thought, that seems significant. That seems like that was important. I wonder if that can happen again. So I sat there and I kind of was doing whatever I was doing before. And I felt the slip again. And this time I felt a reactive terror in response to it that I didn't even know was in me. I mean, because I honestly felt if I kept going, I would die. I would lose life. And I couldn't believe the violence with which my mind reacted, the slamming shut of that door. And I was just left there overwhelmed, even as myself, at the intensity of my unwilling reaction of just slamming that down. And I sat there pondering that for a good while before I was able to fall back to sleep again. And it has stuck with me all these years, this understanding that my life is based fundamentally on fear, that I'm terrified of this truth. The idea of dissolving my ego, the idea of giving up completely and letting go utterly, at some level within me, way below my conscious living, I'm terrified of this. I'm terrified of this. And that is why I sit here, an unrealized soul, piddling with a few little experiences here and there. Yes, Ma.
Swamiji, isn't that what happened to Swami Vivekananda when Sri Ramakrishna gave him that experience?
Yes, absolutely. I have parents at home. What are you doing to me? But that wouldn't have been my fear, but yeah, absolutely. And then Ramakrishna's response, oh, you too. So it's a common thing, apparently, that there's a fear in there. And this is what our practice in partial is about. For the devotee, for the bhakta, he has to go in there and learn trust. To know the nature of God is this love and this kindness and this forgiveness, so that he can overcome that fear through that relationship. For the jnani, it's to go in through discernment and to discover the nature of the universe. That which you're falling into is of the nature of love, is of the nature of wisdom, right? And is eternal, that it's not a death. And so you see, this is a profound thing that we're undertaking. It's not that we have to go get it, it's that we have to accept it. And by ripening here, that's what he's talking about. It's like the process of ripening takes time. Yes, realization is instantaneous. Boom, you can have it this moment. If you could let go of this primordial fear, this primordial distrust, which is one way of talking about distrust of the other, fear of the other, and bring it back to, perhaps you could talk about it in terms of, instead of distrust, talk about it in an unwillingness to trust anything but your ego experience, your ego self experience. So you just can't accept it. And so that's why our meditation, our practice is a matter of acceptance. It's a matter of letting go, right? We see in the Garden of Eden story, which I use as one of my standard references, what was the first result of having formed ego, having eaten the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil? The very first thing they felt was their nakedness, their vulnerability, their smallness. The second thing they felt was when God was walking through the garden, they felt fear, right? We're terrified because of this knowledge of good and evil, because of this knowing that we've somehow violated our own self by cutting ourselves off from our reality, from what we are, and defining ourselves in something small that can fit into the mind. We've identified with the mind, and so our fear of that which can't fit into the mind is profound. So we create an ego to comfort ourselves, and we convince ourselves that we can plan, that we can actually control the future, right? And we, out of that same fear, we constantly change our idea of the future to match the idea that we're in charge of it, right? So that if you're planning something, you want to do a particular thing on that weekend. When that weekend comes, chances are you're not going to be doing it as you planned it. It's probably not going to happen that way. But your ego will continually adjust the nature of the plan so that whatever happens on Saturday is what you planned. Because the ego is terrified of not being in charge, of not being in control. And so it forms itself in a way that keeps itself secure, that keeps its identity intact. Yes, no, I get it. I'm safe. All is well. We can do this. Right? So the questioner now says, well, the essence of art is to use the outer form to convey an inner experience. Of course, one must be sensitive to the inner before the outer can be meaningful. How does one grow in sensitivity? Maharaj, I love this answer because you can see what he's thinking. He says, whichever way you want to put it, it comes out the same. It's like, sit here and gyrate as much as you want, think about your angles and your perspectives, all that you want. We're still talking about the one without a second here. Givers, there are many, but where are the takers? know, it's the same thing what Ramakrishna says, everybody wants to be a guru. Nobody wants to be a student. And I felt that way. You know, I told you that funny thing that my first 6 months in the monastery, I was so excited about the philosophy. I'd never heard any of it before. It was brand new. And because I was ignorant of it, I assumed everybody else in the world was ignorant of it, and they needed me to tell them about it. So I told Swami Prabhupada I was going to write a book, right? My first 6 months in the monastery. Maharaj, I'm going to write a book. I told him at lunch. He was a very kind and gentle soul, but I just remember because he was always very methodical. Whenever I would ask him a question at the table, he'd be eating, and he would stop eating. He would put his hands on the table and pick up his napkin. He would always wipe his mouth, and then he would set his napkin down. He would take half a breath, and then he would turn to me and give me my answer. Well, this day he turned to me and he said, "Very good." You know, and I thought, oh, cool. And then he said, "But perhaps you should wait until you have something to say." Right? And so that was the process. I remember after I'd been in the monastery for 14 years, which seems like a long time, especially if you're the one there. And my father, you know, he called me that day, that morning, and he had on the phone, he said, "Oh, what are you up to?" And I said, "Oh, I'm weeding the garden, and I've got to start preparing lunch here pretty soon." And he said to me, he says, "You're almost 50 years old. And every time I call you, you're cleaning a toilet, you're washing a floor, you're weeding a garden." He said, "When are you going to do something important with your life? When are they going to let you teach? When are they going to let you give a lecture?" Right? This is my father. And so I hang up that phone thinking, I'm a failure. You know, that's true. How come? Why aren't they? What is this injustice that they haven't put me in the podium yet? What is going on here? And so I went up to Swami and I told him, I said, "Swami, I said, you know, I've been here 15 years and I feel like just a glorified maintenance engineer." And he looked at me and he smiled and he said, "You are." And I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "Well, everybody is. Everyone in this world is just a glorified maintenance engineer. That is all there is to do here is maintain." And I said, "Well, why don't I get to teach?" He said, "You are not a teacher when you decide that you are a teacher." He said, "You're a teacher when somebody comes to you for teaching. So don't ask why you're not a teacher. Ask why nobody's coming to you for teaching." Wow. Did that make the point? It was like, oh my gosh. That was beautiful. It woke me up. It really showed me the truth of the matter. Anyway, the problem is that once I became quite content to wash my dishes and to do my floor, then I was asked to speak. And then I was like, oh boy, what have I done? Then the discomfort was from the other side. My comfortable small world of routine was now very different. And it happened actually right after, the only time I ever got to talk was when I got back from taking my sannyas. And he gave me that first lecture. And that first lecture, I went to the shrine. I was like, I don't know what to say. I said, I'm younger than all of the people in that audience. You know, half those people grew up in India. They've been studying these things for a lifetime. This is presumptuous, you know, that I was coming from the opposite problem. You know, I don't know, I'm terrified. I can't do this. And that's when I told Mother, I said, "Mother, if you're going to keep me in this absurd position where I have to teach people who have been studying things much longer than I have, you're going to have to be the one that does it, just like you did for Vivekananda." You know, and I really believe I really believe that Mother agreed to that. You know, that she would put the words in and they would come out. And it's been great fun because I always tease her to be careful because I tell her if it comes up in my mind, I'll say it. So don't let something come up that can't be said. Right. And so this is the whole notion here. And this is what he's saying. He says, whatever it is, you know, it's going to come out the same. Givers there are many, but where are the takers? Where are the students? You know, not everybody. And this is not only the fact that we're not up speaking or whatever. This again goes back to that point of the conversation. It's like if you go to a teacher to learn something, don't argue. Assume that they know. Accept it and see where it takes you, and then determine whether they were right or wrong. But don't bring your old rotten arguments that have caused you your delusion and caused you your suffering and caused you your ignorance to the table and defend them when they get challenged by the teacher. Lay them down, be a student, let these things wash over you, because it may be something that never, well, I promise you it is something that never occurred to you. That's the thing. Any time that I feel like I've had an experience of taking a step forward, as delusional as that may or may not be, it was always that way. It was when I took a perspective that I had never imagined, that I had never thought of, right? It's usually an act of surrender when you're in a neutral place where you're not thinking of something or a direction or a comparison or a challenge, but you hear it and somehow it gets past all of that before your defenses come up. And you're like, whoa, wow, amazing, brand new. What a new vista. And I'm startled by how different a world can be to two people who are experiencing the same thing. That you can be, I was sitting in the doctor's office not too many weeks ago for a checkup. And I was just kind of looking around the room and I was thinking, gosh, all of us right now are having the same experience, but all of us are in radically different places. That experience to each one of us is radically different because none of us are in the moment. All of us brought our story into this room with us and we're sitting in it and experiencing the exact same moment in radically different ways. I was laying on the front lawn of the Olima retreat years ago. I was just laying in the grass on a sunny day and I saw this little ant that was crawling up the blades of grass, hitting the top and then turning around, going back down and up the next one and back down. I was kind of just pondering that life, like, well, what would it be like to be that ant? And then there was one of those little jumping spiders, that are just suddenly here and then suddenly there and suddenly here. And that jumping spider jumped and ate the ant. And I thought, oh my God, look wow. Here I am enjoying that space, laying in the lawn. Oh, what a beautiful day, the nice sunshine. And that ant was living in terror. And that spider was hunting, radically different experiences, radically different stories in the exact same environment. And I thought, hell is never going to be over there. Heaven's never going to be out there. It's going to develop in you when you get rid of all story, but at least, when you see the story from the perspective of understanding, that will be heaven. The deeper into your delusion you go, that will be hell. And so you can have two people sitting on the bus next to each other. One will be in heaven. Life is great. Life is beautiful. Life is. And the other one will be terribly, suffering because of the story. And it's very rarely any more than the story, but we have to obey that story. So he says, whichever way you put it, it comes to the same. Well, can you not share your own sensitivity? Yes, I can. But sharing is a two-way street. Two are needed in sharing. Who is willing to take what I am willing to give? Questioner, oh, he's getting sassy. You may say we are one. Is that enough? Not enough? Maharaj, I am one with you. Are you one with me? If you are, you will not ask questions. If you are not, if you do not see what I see, what can I do beyond showing you the way to improve your vision? Right? So listen to that. You say that we are one. Is that not enough, Maharaj? Well, I'm one with you, but are you one with me? Right? Have you set down your boundaries of egoism that separates you? Have you let go of your thoughts, of the thoughts, let's say it that way, not your thoughts, the thoughts that are different from these thoughts? Have you laid down the story that's different from this story? Because it's when we lay down our stories that we're one. And it's not when we bring our information to the table and hope to line it up and match it out. It's when we let go of our information. If you are, you will not ask questions. If you're one with me, there's no need to ask those questions. If you are not, if you do not see what I see, what can I do beyond showing you the way to improve your vision? Right? To see that oneness. Questioner, what you cannot give is not your own. Oof. Maharaj, I claim nothing as my own. When the I is not, where is the mine? Two people look at a tree. One sees the fruit hidden among the leaves and the other does not. Otherwise, there is no difference between the two. The one that sees knows that with a little attention, the other will also see. But the question of sharing does not arise. Believe me, I am not close-fisted, holding back your share of reality. On the contrary, I am all yours. Eat me and drink me. But while you repeat verbally, give, give, you do nothing to take what is offered. I am showing you a short and easy way to being able to see what I see. But you cling to your old habits of thought, your old habits of feeling, your old habits of action, and put all the blame on me. I have nothing which you do not have. Self-knowledge is not a piece of property to be offered and accepted. It's a new dimension altogether, where there is nothing to give and nothing to take. Oh, this is great. The questioner responds, look at this first word. Give us at least some insight. Right? Isn't that what that is? I was laughing one time with Swami Prabhupada after a question and answer session. I was a brahmachari at the time too, and it was entertaining to me because Maharaj had just given this whole lecture about you've never been born, you've never died, right? And literally the very first question from the audience was, what happens after we die? Right? And that's how it is. That's how we are. You know, we're Vedantins, we hear all of these truths all the time, but then we live as if we had never heard them before at all, right? That's one of my favorite things right now in life. I feel really blessed in this sense, in that, you know, in the monastery, in one sense, it looks like from the outside, oh, what faith, you've renounced everything. From inside the monastery, you're like, what have I renounced? I've got a bed, I've got food cooked for me 3 times a day. You know, when I lived in San Francisco, the monastery is literally an old Victorian mansion. You know, it's like, I used to laugh that to get my multi-million-dollar view of the bay, I had to renounce the world. You know, and so I would think like that. And so in Hollywood, you know, at some point you begin to feel like you're not really the real thing because everything's so easy. You know, it's all, mother provides it all. But she's put an institution between you and her. And so you blame the institution. Oh, it's the institution that's taking care of me. It's the institution that is feeding me. And so when I was given permission to do this experiment in Colorado, I know I've shared this, but this is so important to me. It's I feel like I traveled 10 years forward in my development by this, because I was offered support from Bellarmont. You know, when they gave me the permission to go off for the 2 years, they said, if you need support, let us know. We can take care of that. And I wrote back and said, no, I don't want support. I want freedom. I don't want to be beholden to anything. I want this to be a really open and neutral experiment with this thing. I moved out of a monastery with nothing. I had $79. You know, I arrived in Colorado, well, $79 after I paid the initial fees, you know, for getting there and for getting the room that I was renting. And so that first night I sat there, I got $79. It's 2.5 years later. Everything has been covered. I mean, I have spent, I don't know the exact amount, but I mean, you know, my rent's $750 a month for a room. You know, it's the cheapest one in Lafayette. And then $100 for my utilities. And then all of my food, which is going up and up and up and up. But all of that has happened. All of that has been covered. Add that up for 2 years. That's a lot of money. I never asked for a single penny of it. I never went to anyone ever and said, hey, we've got these bills. They have to be covered. Mother provides. If you don't believe it, surrender to it and see. You know, and it doesn't come through avenues that can be blamed for it. You know, you're in the same situation, but you blame your job. You blame your income on your effort, right? That's not the truth. Yes, sir.
Okay, one of my big confusions with this is what exactly do people mean when they talk about the mother? And you and I talked about this briefly a few days ago, and if I remember correctly, you said mother is everything that's not me, and that when I reach a awakened state, there will be no me and mother will be everything. Is that sort of what you meant to say?
Yes.
Okay, so, but then over and over again from you and others, I hear this, mother is like somebody that does something for me, that gives me money or whatever. So which is it? Or is it just two ways of looking at the same thing? Or wait, do you personally believe that there is a deity that gave you money when you went to Colorado and all the different things that people say mother provides? Do you believe that?
Yes.
Okay.
I experienced that. I didn't believe it. I didn't know that I believed it. But after the demonstration of it, I believe it. Because Ramakrishna says, you see, we have this idea that, what idea do we have? Ramakrishna knew the one without a second. He experienced that. He knew it in the only legal way you can say that, which can't say it in language. And what he knew, we can't say what he knew. But he had that experience. His body laid there completely immobile and without any sign of life for 6 months, and was force-fed by one of his devotees and rolled over on the ground to keep him from rotting in one place for 6 months. So he had a working knowledge of that. And to get there, he had to slice his idea of the mother in half. Remember with Totapuri, his Advaitic teacher, he couldn't get there. He couldn't get there. And he kept telling Totapuri, is like, I can't, every time I go there, mother appears. I can't get past it. And so Totapuri takes that piece of glass and shoves it into his forehead and says, put your attention here, And Ramakrishna then said, the mother appeared, and I picked up a sword in my mind and I sliced her in half, killed her. And then boom, he went into that Advaitic state for 6 months, not unmoving in samadhi that entire time. We have this idea that God is a figment or a creation of our imagination. But Thakur had many visions of God. There is the planes that we live on, the planes of consciousness. God can be physically real, and God is always physically real. Whether you experience him, her, that as God or not depends on your idea of yourself. You're the one that's make-believe. You're the one that's not real. But if you have created a perspective and you look at the reality, God can be seen and God can be experienced. Is God different than you? At that level of your perception, yes, because you cannot accept that he, she, that isn't separate from you or different from you. Do we trust it? No, because we have an egoistic perspective. I am that. I'm that. I'm going to learn this. I'm going to do this. But but that's not the fact. The absurdity is not to think that God is real. The absurdity is that you think you're real. You, this thing that has changed continually every moment of your life, you think that's real. This body, which is completely unrecognizable to what you were born into this world with, that's more than 10 times the size of it, it looks nothing like it. You somehow have called that I for 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 years without blinking an eye at the impossibility of it, the absurdity of it. We hold on to our mind, which doesn't stay the same even for the completion of a sentence. And we think that's who I am. That's the mistake. Not that we think that there's a God or potentially think that there's a God out there, but that we think that we don't know the oneness of that knowledge, that we distrust that as being unreal and this as being real. It's like the person in the dream, he thinks he's real. You think when you dream that experiencer of the dream is real. And if I were to come to you in that dream and say, no, you know what, there's a dreamer upstairs, you'd be like, what? Look at this. Where? What evidence do you have of a dreamer? Where's the dreamer? Nothing I could show you in the dream is going to indicate the dreamer, except the existence of the dream itself, right? So when I say mother, it really, truthfully, if I'm utterly honest with it, it's made up. I don't know what mother is, but I know the nature of the universe to be love, wisdom, and being. And the highest form of love that I can think of, the deepest wisdom that I can think of, brings to me the idea of a mother. You know, the fact that in this dream I'm taken care of is the figment, not whether or not somebody's taking care of me, but the fact that I believe myself something that needs to be taken care of, right? Think of the absurdity in a dream. The dreamed character sitting there eating an apple is, oh, I'm so hungry, I've got to eat this apple. And you come into that world from the dreamer world, and you're like, dude, you don't need that apple. You're as unreal as that apple is. What am I going to say? What are you talking about? I'm eating an apple. I can taste it. Look at my body, my dream body here. It's well fed. I've been taken care of. You know, cause and effect, baby. But the dreamer stepped into the dream and says, dude, you don't need that apple. You don't need you. Both of them are part of a dream. You're everything in here. You see, I'm giving you the same words that all the sages are giving you at this very moment. You're everything. You have no boundary. You're everyone in the room. Sri Nisargadatta makes that point exactly. He says, your trouble is not your attachment to your body. He says, your trouble is that you attach to only one body. You don't think that anybody else is you. You're the dreamer. All of this is you. So you see the trouble that we're in. You step into the dream and try and teach it, the dreamed, about the reality of the dreamer. You're going to say the exact same things that Maharaj is telling us right now, right? And so, yes, but further than that, there's an interesting point that I only really was confronted with. I think it was I time with me. I don't know how long ago it was. Seems like 2 or 3 years ago. I read in the scriptures, you know, that I had read at the very beginning that the devotion of the devotee freezes God into a form, right? God becomes a form that represents to you the highest ideal of love that you have, and that's God. And so I thought, okay, I can see that. God is temporary. He becomes a form. I use him to get to a knowledge, and then it's done. But there's a very disturbing passage where Sri Ramakrishna says, but there are places in the ocean where the ice never melts. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. What is this? You know, suddenly this childish idea of a heaven that I used to think about my old Christianity. Oh, what a childish idea of the heaven. Here I see Ramakrishna saying, but there's places in the ocean where the ice never melts. And this idea of the loka, you know, where people who love Krishna, people who love Rama, people who love Ramakrishna, Jesus, Buddha, there is a place in the ocean where they can spend an eternity enjoying sugar, if that's their ideal. Or they can just become sugar, the one without a second. But both are real. Both can be said, this is the way it is, right? And so, yes, I say that Mother is taking care of me, because from within the dream, that's what I've experienced. And in my dream ignorance, that's what I think is real. And when I come to my true knowledge, it's not Mother who's going to disappear. It's me. My ego self is going to pop. And I'm going to realize I was a drop in the ocean of Mother. You know, that's the reality. Does that mean you have to believe in God to get there? No, absolutely not. You know, that's just helpful to those people who see it that way or feel it that way or know it that way within themselves. But if that's not necessary or not desirable for you or for someone who's not interested in that, that is not a statement of fact on either side of the imagined argument. It's just a perception of reality from an ego perspective inside the dream at the moment, right?
For many people, I believe it's easier to love or know God through a human guru.
Mhm.
And I mean, I know that's true for me. Because I mean, isn't there a saying the guru is God?
Mhm. Well, you see the guru as God, yeah. Treat your guru as God.
You know, personally, I can love a human guru, but I can't love an abstract God.
Yes, and that's the difficulty,
Yeah.
who can fall in love with the wind, and that's why we give God a form, if we're taking the path of devotion. So it's 12:09. We're supposed to stop at, we started at 11? Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, I've done it again. I apologize to everyone. So if anybody needs to go, we'll stop and start questions and answers at this point. And I'm going to turn off the recorder here so that